Okay, before we get into this, two things. One, this video will have spoilers for Poppy Playtime Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. But I mean, if you clicked on a video like this, you probably already knew that. Two, yes, this isn't a FNAF video. But come on guys, I'm just being a man of my word. And remember to subscribe for daily Poppy Playtime Chapter 2 theories and speculation videos. Okay, but being real, if I only do FNAF videos forever, I may actually lose my mind someday. So hopefully y'all are fine with stuff like this occasionally. Okay, that's it. Enjoy the video, bros. You know, I really didn't plan on making a video about this game. In fact, for the longest time, I actively didn't want to. A little background on me. Other than Five Nights at Freddy's, I'm not really a fan of what I like to call mascot horror games. Although you may know this genre as family-friendly horror. Thanks, Security Breach, for that great line. Titles like Bendy and Hello Neighbor never really interested me, and they always just seemed like cheap attempts at catching the same popularity wave FNAF did. Maybe I will go play these games at some point, but I've heard enough bad word of mouth to make me avoid them at pretty much all costs. So here we have Poppy Playtime. Another episodic mascot horror game. It was safe to say I was not interested or impressed, so I ignored the game. Didn't think about it one bit and let it sit in the back of my mind for months. That was until about 1 month ago, when all hell broke loose for Poppy Playtime. A tidal wave of drama and bad press flooded my Twitter feed, to the point where it was pretty much all I saw for literal days. I don't even follow any Poppy Playtime accounts. It was all just FNAF accounts dunking on the game. Videos by fellow creators Dags and Theft King didn't help either, with even more of Mob Games' shady past being brought to the light. For a literal month straight, Poppy Playtime was public enemy number 1. Then, only a couple days ago, Chapter 2 finally dropped. After being presented with what was essentially a month-long smear campaign to not play Poppy Playtime, I think all of the negative attention did the exact opposite for me. I ended up becoming interested in something I had zero interest in because I heard about it each and every single day for a month straight. I was so curious at the end of it all that I had no other choice but to give the game a shot, even if I was going in with the absolute worst expectations humanly possible for a video game. On the exact same day Chapter 2 was supposed to drop, I saw a bootleg Poppy Playtime plush in real life, which was not only extremely weird to see, but I also took it as a sign. I had to play it. Literally everything was going against me liking Poppy Playtime, the type of game it is, all the drama building up to the release. But you know what? I didn't hate it. In fact, I actually really enjoyed it. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. Before we talk about Chapter 2, I should quickly go over my thoughts on the first chapter, since I only just played it for the first time on the same day Chapter 2 came out. Okay, Chapter 1. Funny story here. Because I waited until the day of Chapter 2 releasing to play Chapter 1, I didn't have to pay a single penny for it because they ended up making it free. I'm assuming they did this to make the $10 price tag of Chapter 2 a little more easy to swallow, but we'll get back to that later. Still, it's a little lame this happened, and I hope those who bought into the game early get compensated in some way, because all of these people essentially paid for a tech demo proof of concept game. Chapter 1 is fine. It's very short, taking me only around 45 minutes to complete on my first run through it. But let it be clear that Chapter 1 really isn't much of an actual game. It's more of an example of what a full game could be. Right away, big thing to state, Poppy Playtime is not a horror game, as much as it's trying to portray itself that way. Is there horror in it? Yes, absolutely, and most of it is exceptionally good. But don't get it twisted. The majority of this chapter is puzzles. This is a puzzle game first, horror game second. Obviously, it'd be pretty hard to market a puzzle game where you use a grab pack to light up electrical poles. So slap on a horror chase at the end and put Huggy Wuggy's big smiling grin on all of the marketing. Except for the PC icon, I guess. I guess they just cut off all his teeth here for some reason. Give this man some dentures, please. Thank you. I know you're all here for Chapter 2. So I will very quickly go over my thoughts on Chapter 1, so we can dive right into what Chapter 2 brings to the table. I love the intro cutscene. The effects used to make it look like an old VHS tape look great here, and I was really impressed watching it for the first time. The grab pack is pretty fun to use. It feels satisfying to shoot out the hand, and you can move around all kinds of stuff in the environment as well. Like I said, most of this chapter is just puzzles. The first puzzle to enter the second room is actually pretty clever, while being incredibly simple. It actually did take me a bit to connect the colors on the train to the colors on the keypad. The majority of the puzzles in Poppy Playtime Chapter 1 are these sections where you have to use your hands to bring electricity from a source to power something up. I really didn't have much fun with these. This is probably just a me thing, but I just don't enjoy this kind of puzzle game that much. They're all just kind of boring and slow down gameplay for the sake of having the player do something. Thankfully though, I think Chapter 2 does these puzzles a lot better for the most part. Chapter 1 ends with a chase scene starring Huggy Wuggy. This was easily the highlight of the chapter for me, and genuinely scared me. My heart was racing the whole time I was running through those tight corridors, trying to find the correct way out. The way you kill Huggy Wuggy is also great. I didn't know what to do the first time, so I ended up dying, but on my second time getting to the end, I noticed the box with handprints on it and was able to kill him. Super great ending, and the cliffhanger was also not too shabby. The ending being so great left me leaving the game in a good mood, but most of the gameplay to get to that fantastic ending was boring and repetitive. I was definitely worried if this same format would work in a much longer chapter. I wouldn't be able to find out for myself until the next day, thanks to my current internet essentially being as useful as 1998 dial-up. But that was probably for the best being real. In between the time I finished Chapter 1 and I was finally able to play Chapter 2, a couple of important bug fixes were quickly released by the team over at Mob Games, so props to them for being so on the dot with bug fixes. It was a new day. I had a night to sleep on my thoughts about Chapter 1, and I was cautiously optimistic to find out what Chapter 2 was going to add to the gameplay. That $5 price hike must have been for a reason, right? Well, let's find out. Is Poppy Playtime Chapter 2 actually any good? But before we get into that, no, I don't have a sponsor or anything, but I have been made aware that people won't subscribe to your channel unless you literally tell them to do so. So, subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the video and want to see more like this one. Super thanks have also been enabled on the channel now. These are donations you can make to me through the comment section. So if you want to support me directly, this is the best way to do that right now. Okay, enough shilling for myself. Let's talk about Poppy Playtime Chapter 2! Poppy Playtime Chapter 2 takes the core ideas of Chapter 1 and expands them in ways that not only make this chapter a much more enjoyable experience, but actually make me excited to see what the future chapters have in store. One of the biggest selling points about this chapter, besides the new monster, is the addition of the green hand for your grab pack. This hand is able to carry electricity around with it without being connected to anything. This leads to some fun puzzles that I think are a pretty direct improvement over the electricity puzzles found in Chapter 1. Said Chapter 1 style puzzles are also back as well, and they still aren't amazing, but a couple of them actually shook things up in a cool way. My favorite of these electricity puzzles by far is the one that uses the new pull-up mechanic. There will be very noticeable handles spread throughout the map of Chapter 2 that you can use to either swing across bottomless pits or pull yourself up to higher areas. This is used for some really great sections, such as a puzzle I just mentioned, or this part during the final chase sequence where you have to hide in a small area that can only be reached with a pull-up bar. That as an idea is already really cool, but the way it flows into the chase is super clever. This small area you have to pull up to is used a little bit earlier as part of a puzzle within the chase. So when Mommy Longlegs makes you run back the way you came and ends up putting you in a room with no exit, the player will remember the pull-up handle from earlier and know exactly what to do. I just thought that use of the gimmick was especially great. On the other hand though, swinging is an interesting idea and concept, but the execution kinda feels clunky. Your run speed never feels fast enough to make a big leap off an edge into a fast swing feel satisfying. I genuinely ended up dying more to bottomless pits in this game than I did to actual monsters, which either means I am just terrible at these swinging segments or they are just designed poorly. Probably the first one, but hey, I thought I'd mention it. Anyway, back to the puzzles. Even though the runtime of this chapter is much longer than the first, I never felt like the puzzles were too common. Maybe this is because of the many varieties of puzzles now, but I never really got bored. During Chapter 1, I was constantly just waiting for the damn thing to end, but I really never felt like that during my playthrough of Chapter 2. Another big thing that helps with making this chapter feel more like a cohesive game is that there isn't just one main horror segment at the end of the chapter. The story has you go through 3 different abandoned games that each feature their own monster, or sometimes monsters to deal with. I'll go through each one of them and explain what I thought was cool and what I thought just didn't work. The first game is a pretty simple round of Simon Says. You have a monster above your head, and each time you mess up he gets closer, and each time you correctly input the colors he gets repelled. This is kind of a lazy game being real, but for some reason I really enjoyed it. Maybe it's because using the grab pack hands to hit stuff is just so fun. The whole chapter is littered with these cardboard cutouts featuring great art of the Playtime Co. toys. Each of these has a little button you can press that plays a small audio clip, and I ended up hitting every single one of them just because it was fun. Anyway, here's my biggest issue with this part of the game. The big joke here is that more and more buttons keep popping up, making the Simon Says even harder, which is a great way to mix up the simple game concept. You have to look all around you and hit the buttons that show up in different areas. My big problem here comes with how this gimmick is introduced. Okay, so the first color that shows up during the Simon Says that isn't one of the main 4 colors is violet. As a player, this will of course come as a surprise because this isn't a color that you have a button for. What you're supposed to do is turn around and a violet button will be waiting for you there. However, what my mind went to straight away was mixing colors. The grab pack has 2 hands, you have both red and blue buttons, so my first assumption was to try to hit 2 buttons at once, which would have been a much smarter gameplay gimmick in my opinion. Obviously that wasn't what they were going for, and the part where a million buttons pop up was a fun ending, but if they wanted to introduce this twist better in a way that wouldn't have confused the player, they should have either had the first abnormal color be something that can't be mixed using any of the other 4 colors, or had the first new button show up next to the main 4. That way the player now understands that more buttons could pop up at any moment right away. When you beat the game, Mommy Longlegs gives you a part of the train code. This train code, once completed, will allow the player to access the train to leave the building, which is the main goal of the chapter. Mommy Longlegs gives you a part of the code each time you beat a game, or at least she's supposed to. Doesn't mean she'll actually follow through on that promise. This chapter features a lot of voice acting compared to the first one, which is a much welcomed change. Mommy Longlegs' voice actor does a fantastic job at sounding both loving and terrifying, even if some of the dialogue is a bit corny and trying a little too hard to be creepy.
Or I'll tear you apart and eat your insides while you're still alive.
Mommy Longlegs as a villain of the main chapter is just great in general. Every scene with her is animated wonderfully, such as when she hands you part of the train code or during the final chase scene. When her eyes get all crazy near the end, it really adds a lot to her design when it comes to making her look creepy. Her jump scare, and most of the jump scares for that matter, are super well animated. I hate comparing here, but Security Breach wished it had jump scares this good for a real-time 3D game. It's not even a competition. Next up is Whack-A-Wuggy, which sees the player trapped in a pit full of holes that different colored Huggy Wuggies can crawl out of. Bootleggers are gonna have a field day with this, I can already tell. When they crawl out, you can use your grab pack arms to shove them back into the holes they came from. However, if one gets too far out of the hole, it will start making a noise and then jump scare you. I died quite a few times in this segment, as near the end the amount of Wuggies that start appearing is a little insane. Thankfully, the game stops right as it's getting a little too much to handle, but regardless, I still think this is a pretty fun part. My heart was genuinely racing near the end. Maybe not from the horror aspect, but more from the if I die here I have to redo this entire part of the game aspect. I think my biggest complaint with this game is just how dark this room is. It's good for making the environment look scary, I guess, but I had to go into the settings and turn the brightness all the way up to even have a good shot at beating this one. Regardless, it's a fun use of the grab pack arms and is over pretty quick. After Whack-A-Wuggy, you have to do one of the more interesting green hand electricity puzzles where you need to move a cart through gates that only open once green power is given to them. Kissy Missy also makes an appearance here to help you out for some reason. I hope this is touched upon a bit during Chapter 3, because as it stands, it kinda just comes out of nowhere and isn't brought up again. Good YouTube theory bait though. I assume by the time this video's out, there will probably be a million videos talking about this one 20-second scene. The final game is essentially red light, green light with this dog caterpillar monster called Pugapillar. This game is just kind of fine. It's a cool concept, but it's super easy and also kind of broken. I didn't even notice you're supposed to grab onto the pull bar to continue until I literally started clipping into the debris at the end of the section. I had to make sure I wasn't going crazy over this, and sure enough, Horoscoped did a great short video covering this exact thing. It's easy, it's over before you know it, probably the worst of the 3 games, even if the concept in theory was a cool idea. The next part of the chapter is by far one of the worst. You have 2 buttons used to move these 2 different platforms, but the answer to this puzzle is very easy, and if you just spam the buttons enough, it's not really much of a challenge. So I don't even understand why it was included in the first place. A simple bridge would have been much more effective here. To leave this room, you have to get a toy and put it in a toy scanner, but the conveyor belt puzzle to get said toy is terrible in my opinion. If you didn't see the toy scanner, which I didn't, it's super unclear what you're even supposed to be doing here. All the controls are scattered across the whole room, and the layout would make you think that you just need to reroute the assembly line to activate something. But nope, you just grab the toy and leave. If this weird bridge puzzle was just replaced with a normal bridge, this would be much less of an issue as well, since you'd just be able to walk over to the other side of the bridge real quick and see that the toy scanner is there. Instead, you have to go back up, mess with the buttons just to check, which most people probably won't do, and instead just route the bridge to the room with the open entryway. This then leads to a confusing puzzle with no clear goal or ending, since the player doesn't even know the toy scanner exists.
Rant over.
The electricity puzzle following this is pretty alright though. The mix of both styles of carrying electricity are used pretty well here. Finally, we have the Mommy Longlegs chase sequence. The way you trigger it is fantastic, with you going to grab the pull bar, only for Mommy to leap down in front of you. Once again, really great animation throughout this entire chapter. This chase is pretty good. It's much longer than the Huggy Wuggy chase, since this one isn't as urgent at parts, and is broken up by a couple puzzles. The puzzle where you have to repair the gear was a little confusing in my opinion, since the place where you attach the gear is tucked in a corner. Other than that though, I thought it was a pretty decent puzzle. The webs building up all around the environment is also a great visual touch. The final part of the chase where you just have to wait there while the door slowly opens is easily one of the best parts. When it finally opens, she runs in, gets caught by the machine, you use your arm to pull the lever, and...
What have you done? You make me part of you! You can't do this to me!
Some metal hand takes her away, and that pretty much wraps up the gameplay of this chapter. You're given the final train code from Poppy, and the game ends on a pretty good cliffhanger. Definitely curious to see what will happen in the upcoming parts. Poppy Playtime Chapter 1 is a short, kind of boring puzzle game that ends in a fantastic chase scene. Poppy Playtime Chapter 2 is a longer, more interesting puzzle game with more diverse puzzle gimmicks, new gameplay styles to break up the formula, and a more prominent horror theme. Even if I think they should push the horror aspect even more going forward. As it stands, Chapter 2 still feels more like a puzzle game than a horror game, but they are getting closer to a good balance, and I hope future chapters can strike it. However, there are still a few things I worry about. Will this formula get stale by the time the final chapter rolls around? Maybe even sooner? The big chases at the end are great, but after 2 of them, will a third even hit the same? I plan on making a short video talking about what I want to see from Poppy Playtime Chapter 3 soon after this one goes up. I have a few things I want to see going forward, and I think it would work better as a separate video. Now for an important question. Is this chapter worth the $10 price tag? It's a hard question to answer, and for every person it might be different. It definitely shouldn't have been $5. It's worth much more than Chapter 1's original price tag. I think $7 or $8 might have been a little easier to swallow. 10 is just a little bit much. Is it longer than Chapter 1? Of course. But even then, it's still not that long. Unless you are really, really interested in playing this, I might recommend just waiting for a sale or something. Did I enjoy it? Yeah, a lot actually. But I just don't know how worth this chapter is for $10. I came into this game with the absolute worst mindset possible, and ended up leaving this chapter a fan of the game. I'm genuinely interested to see what happens next, and I think that the game is going in the right direction. If all the company's bad doings have soured your outlook of Poppy Playtime, I don't blame you. But putting everything aside, I think the studio is incredibly talented, and I hope that each chapter builds upon the last in meaningful ways. This cannot be a Bendy situation, where the last chapter is a rushed, buggy mess. I really hope Mob Games takes their time with everything. I know as a studio can seem very lucrative to capitalize on the success of Poppy as fast as possible, but I really believe that they should be taking their sweet time with this game, to make it the best it can possibly be. The Poppy Playtime movie even being a thing that got announced worries me a lot. That's something to do after all the chapters are out. All I'm trying to say is, don't jeopardize the quality of the game moving forward just to cash in, and really put your all into making each chapter better than the last. I want to be right here when Chapter 3 comes out, giving it high praise once again. That's really all I gotta say for now. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and make sure to let me know what you thought of it. I've been Yeah, and I'll see you all next time.